I'd like to welcome everybody here today. I'm Peter Van Loon. I'm a member of the Veteran of Foreign Wars Medicon Post 1926. And I'm here to welcome you to the 103rd observance of Memorial Day in Simsbury, Connecticut. Just so you know that as also part of this ceremony, or part of this memory of our fallen vets, earlier this month, over 1,700 flags were posted over the graves of the Simsbury veterans that are in all the town's cemeteries. With that, I'd like to ask Reverend Gene Ott of the Simsbury United Methodist Church to come on up and open with a prayer.
Good afternoon. Sections of my prayer this afternoon come from a prayer that was delivered by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt on the evening of June 6, 1944. At that point, he was aware that the landings that had happened in Normandy, France were successful but had been costly, and so he called the country to a time of prayer. He began this way: Almighty God, our sons and daughters, the pride of our nation this day, have set upon a mighty endeavor, a struggle to preserve our republic, our religion, our civilization, and to set free a suffering humanity. Lead them straight and true. Give strength to their arms, stoutness to their hearts, steadfastness in their faith. Our sons and daughters are lately drawn from the ways of peace. As such, they fight not for the lust of conquest, they fight to end conquest. They fight to liberate. They fight to let justice arise and tolerance and goodwill among all thy people. They yearn but for the end of battle, for their return to the haven of home. Some will never return. Embrace these, God, and receive them, thy heroic servants, into thy kingdom. And for us at home, fathers, mothers, children, wives, sisters, and brothers of brave people overseas, whose thoughts and prayers are ever with them, help us, Almighty God, to rededicate ourselves in renewed faith in thee this hour of great sacrifice. Would you pray with me? On this day, as we come together for barbecues, pool parties, and gatherings with friends and family, keep us mindful of the sacrifice made over the centuries by our brave fighting women and men. Remind us again of the precious freedom that we enjoy in this country, a freedom which was hard-won and should never be trivialized or taken for granted. 75 years ago, our country and our allies around the globe were called to sacrifice for the greater good. And while today we are rarely called upon to do that, on this beautiful day in Simsbury, we pray for the same fortitude of spirit in order to support those who sacrifice daily. As such, let FDR's encouragement to our ancestors that they, quote, rise to each new day and again when each day is spent, and let words of prayer be on our lips invoking thy help to our efforts. Further, keep us strong, keep our hearts stout, allow us to bear sorrows together, help us to give courage to our daughters and sons, and let peace prevail. Amen. Amen.
It was almost 75 years ago that D-Day happened, the 6th of June, 1944. And in honor of that, we have today several of Simsbury's residents who were veterans of that conflict. And I'd like to introduce them. We've got Dan Crowley. He was Army and co-opted into the Marine Corps, I understand. Prisoner of war, survivor of Bataan, Corregidor, and forced labor in Japan. Over here we've got Tony Giannini, U.S. Navy. He served on an LST, landing ship tank, an amphibious ship in the Southern Pacific. Also, my neighbor, Ben Walker, a Navy Seabee. And finally, but not last, or not least, is Loring Johnson, U.S. Army, served in the Blue Devil Brigade in Europe. We also have here today several of our local and state leaders. I'd like to introduce them. First of all, Town Manager Maria Capriola. We've got our first Selectman, the Honorable Eric Wellman. We have our Selectmen, Chris Kelly, Sean Askham, Cheryl Cook, Mike Payne, and Chris Peterson. Other elected rep, our state representative, John Hampton. And especially our guest today is the Commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Veterans Affairs, Major Thomas Soddy. Several years ago, when this memorial was built, the Simsbury Fire Department donated the flagpole. You'll see that there's no flag on it right now. Every year, the fire department had committed to providing us with a new flag, and that's what we're going to do today. Lieutenant Chris Burkett and firefighter Gianni Zunino of the fire department will now present a new flag and raise it to fly over the memorial for the next year. As it is being raised, please remove your caps as Dave Moore sings our national anthem. All those who are able, please rise.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you. Please seat. At this point, I'd like to ask our first selectman, the Honorable Eric Wellman, to come up and offer us a welcome.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the town, I welcome you here today on this Memorial Day 2019, where we pause. We take a pause in our busy lives and come together as a community to remember and to reflect. Lest we never forget that we call home a beautiful, remarkable place, the United States of America, and the town of Simsbury, because of the service and the sacrifice of the men and women across our great nation and here at home. This is the day we remember the residents of this community who gave their lives in service to their country, forever engraved in this beautiful memorial. I thank our elected leaders for being here today, of course, all of the veterans and all of you, and especially Commissioner Tom Soddy. I'm really appreciative that you could make Simsbury one of your stops today. On behalf of the town, I want to recognize all who made today's parades and ceremonies possible. The veterans of foreign wars post-1926, American Legion post-84, the Scouts of Troop 76. I thank them for putting flags on the graves of veterans, a beautiful service. And thank you to the Masons who are serving ice cream after the ceremony on the front lawn of the library. The theme of today's ceremony is the 75th anniversary of D-Day. The Scouts will be sharing stories of Simsbury veterans who died in World War II. I think about my own grandfather. He served in World War II as a radio operator. I regret that I don't know much about his service. I think he wanted it that way, and it's not something that he spoke much about. My grandfather died just months before the Twin Towers were attacked on September 11th, thus beginning the longest war in US history, a war that is still being fought today. Today, unlike World War II, we lack the notion of shared sacrifice. There are very few signs, especially in Simsbury, Connecticut, that we are a nation at war. We've been a nation at war since many of the scouts here today were born. In the absence of shared sacrifice, I challenge every member of our community to think about what service means to us right here. In what ways can we put our skills, our talents, how can we put our collective brain power together to serve our community, There's a lot written about the decline in volunteerism, especially among the young. I worry about the implications for a democratic society. But I look at the scouts here today and young people throughout our community, and I have a lot of hope. I thank their parents and their leaders for instilling a sense of service in all of its forms. In no way do I compare the service at home to the service and the sacrifices of men and women abroad. But this is a day when we remember those men and women who died serving their country. And I can think of no better way to honor their sacrifice than us here at home, embracing our collective responsibility of strengthening the democratic ideals for which they laid down their lives. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I request that Commissioner Sadi come up to offer us a Memorial Day message. Thomas J. Sadi was confirmed by the Connecticut General Assembly as Commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Veterans Affairs in February 2018. Commissioner Sadi is a major in the Army Reserves, the Judge Advocate General Corps, and he currently serves as the Chief Legal Officer of the 411th Civil Affairs Battalion. Commissioner?
Peter, thank you for the introduction and for your service to our nation and to your brother and sister veterans. Good afternoon, First Selectman Wellman, state and local officials, guests, and most importantly, veterans and members of our armed forces. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to participate in this amazingly patriotic parade and ceremony in the beautiful town of Simsbury, and allowing me to say a few words in addressing the meaning of Memorial Day. We come together to remember and memorialize those who fell in service to our nation, as it is only because of their service and those who continue to serve that we can gather today in this beautiful weather as Americans in this free and democratic nation. And it is our flag, which since June 14th, 1777, has officially stood for that nation. A nation created by and maintained by the men and women in our armed forces, past and present. Those stars and stripes are not just colors on a piece of cloth. They represent those very principles of freedom and democracy, which has been paid for through the service and sacrifice of those in uniform, with many making that ultimate sacrifice, so that not only we can live free, but hundreds of millions of people across the globe can also live in freedom. Something we must ensure that this nation never forgets. But unfortunately, as I've said before, and I'll continue to repeat, this nation has at times forgotten and failed to take up that mantle of supporting our veterans and their families. And I always mention the families because the families serve as well with their veterans when they're in uniform and when they come home. This failure, this stain on our history as Americans was particularly the case with regard to our Vietnam veterans, who had to endure unjustly the protests and attacks of politicians and the apathy of an American public and protesters taunting and insulting them when they returned. What all those people forgot, and what we must always remember, No matter whether we agree or disagree with our domestic or national policy, whether we disagree with our elected officials, we must never let that disagreement translate into a failure to support our men and women in uniform when they are in the fight and when they come home. To all who have served, no matter your branch, whether you served in peacetime or in war, domestically or abroad, active duty, guard, or reserve, you raised your right hand and took that oath to protect and defend this nation. I ask all our veterans and service members to raise that hand again so we can thank you all for your service to our nation. You who raise your hand are part of a rich military tradition. However, as the Reverend said in the words of Franklin Roosevelt, a military tradition unlike that of other countries with rich military histories. Our American military tradition is not the one of conquest for the sake of glory, but one of fighting for freedom. The freedom for 13 colonies, the fight to keep them free from reconquest, the fight to free and enslave people in our own nation and to keep that union whole, the fight in World War I to try to make the world safe for democracy, and the fight in World War II to free Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Pacific from the tyranny of Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. The fight in Korea and Vietnam to aid a desperate people in the struggle against communist aggression. And then in the Cold War to oppose Soviet Russia and the Eastern Bloc. And since then, hundreds of thousands of American men and women have deployed in stability and combat operations around the globe, particularly in our ongoing wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and everywhere in between and around this earth. For nearly 250 years, courageous Americans have stepped forward and taken up that mantle of service. But you are here today because you understand the meaning of service to country and to community. And as others have said, those pool parties and barbecues which we will all enjoy we are only able to enjoy them because of the men and women who have served this nation. I will leave you with this thought. A few days ago, I participated in a ceremony memorializing the 65 men and women from Connecticut who have given their lives in service to this nation since September 11th, 2001. I met with parents, spouses, loved ones of the fallen. I could see both sadness and resolve in their faces. Pride when they placed their hand over their heart when the national anthem was played, and tears welling up in their eyes when the names of their fallen loved one was read aloud. I don't tell you this to sadden you. I tell you this so that we remember that those fallen throughout our history are not only names, or not just names on a wall, or pictures at a memorial. They are not just lines in a history book, or data in a communication from a combatant command. They were and are and will continue to be mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, friends and loved ones who sacrificed their lives for their comrades and for our nation. Remember them today, tomorrow, and each day of the year. And also remember that not a day goes by when an American service member does not suffer from frigid cold, searing heat, deprivation of food and water, and risk of injury or loss of life, so that our American democracy may endure. So I wish you not a happy Memorial Day, but a reflective Memorial Day. May God bless all of you, our veterans and service members, and the United States of America. Thank you.
Now I'd like to welcome Dave Moore back as he sings God Bless America.
while the storm clouds gather far across the sea. Let us swear allegiance to a land that's free. Let us all be grateful for a land so fair that we raise our voices in solemn prayer. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her with the light that is light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
On the memorial, we have inscribed the names of the Simsbury residents who died in the service of their country in our country's wars. I ask Lynn Lanza, Bruce Elliott, Tom Colangelo to come on up and read those names.
Your aunt.
For those who haven't had an opportunity to see and read the plaque that's on the black granite stone to my right, it was intended as a place that visitors would see a message that would explain, in a sense, why this memorial is here and why it's important to us. I want to read the couple sentences that make up the first paragraph. It brought a tear to my eye when I wrote it 5 years ago, and it still does. It begins, Simsbury patriots have answered our country's call to arms since the Revolutionary War. Every day we enjoy the liberty their service secured for us. We owe all those men and women a debt of gratitude beyond measure. But our greatest thanks are deserved by those whose lives were lost in war service. The names of that special group are engraved on these columns behind me. So our community will never forget what they did, and the families that grieve for that. Here are the names beginning with the Revolutionary War dead, and they're in the sequence in which they died. It begins, Elijah Phelps, Carmi Higley, Thomas Holcomb, John Brown, Daniel Moses, Jonathan Pettibone, Jesse Cosett, Seth Case, Joseph Cornish, Oliver Humphrey, Richard Humphrey, Jehiel Bidwell, Erastus Humphrey, Roger Cosett, Thomas Wright, Elihu Humphrey, Jonathan Butoff, Uriah Pease, Josiah Case, Benjamin Brewer, John Garrett, Daniel Barber, Jededish Holcomb, Zachariah Prince, Elijah Humphrey, Lemuel Colton, John Fletcher, Abel Forward, Dudley Hayes, George Merrill, and Joseph Moore.
Simsbury, Civil War dead. Trowbridge Prindle, Elisha Cleveland, Dwayne Brown, Edward Gorman, Joseph Toy, John Kilbourne, Lucius Holcomb, Oliver Case, James Grugan, Orville Wilson, Miles Shepard, Thomas Talmadge, Samuel Taylor, Lucius Marks, Edward Prindle, Leroy Tuller, Wharton Goddard, Hosea Case, Charles Tenselin, George Shepard, John Jones, Curtis Bacon, Orlando Ringmid, John Meal, Robert Ballantyne, James Wells, Richard Sizer, Thomas Andrus, Christopher Johnson, Felix Maine, Charles Hudson, William Johnson, Albert Kahn, William Mahar, William Jackson, James McKinley, Gustavus Strawbelt.
I shall begin with World War I. David Galloway, George Hall, Jeremiah Leahy, Joseph Tamalonis, Frederick Weed. World War II. Clifton Brno, Russell Cable, Merwin Shagnon, Robert Condon, Joseph Dembrowski, Leon Hoppy, Roland Levine, Harrison Petoskey, Silvio Salvatore, Carlton Sawyer, Arthur Scanaccio, David Spatcher, John Stephenson Jr., Frank Strider, Gordon Tatro, Ami Voiland, Isidore Zarnowski, from the Korean War, Leon Moran Jr., Howard Higley, from the Vietnam War, Richard Keithline, William Markarian, Arthur Smith, and from the Global War on Terror, Felix Del Greco.
Thank you, gentlemen. As an old Eagle Scout, I'm glad to say that the next part of the ceremony is going to be done by the Scouts of Troop 76. When I was growing up, there was an adjective in front of that, but that's no longer applies, as you'll see in this ceremony. I'd like to invite the Scouts of Troop 76 who have researched and created a notebook about some of the life stories of our veterans from World War II. And coming up to read the names in those stories are Scouts Chris Harville, John Cody, Gavin Watt, Ward Barrett, and Olivia Creighton and Ella Schulitz. Please come on up.
Sergeant Silvio J. Salvatore. Sergeant Salvatore was born in 1922 in Simsbury. He enlisted on October 17, 1942, and served in the United States Air Force in the 772nd Bomb Squadron as an aerial gunner. He was one of 4 sons of Mr. and Mrs. Fred Salvatore. Sergeant Salvatore attended Simsbury High School and Hartford Trade School. He was a mechanic by trade and worked at Pringle's Garage. Silvio Salvatore achieved the rank of sergeant in the Army Air Corps and was flying a B-17 Flying Fortress when he was killed in a mid-air collision approximately 10 miles outside MacDill Air Base in Florida. All 10 souls on board were killed. He died at age 21 on November 19, 1943. He is buried in his hometown at the St. Bernard Cemetery in Terriffill.
Merwin E. Chagan was a technical sergeant in the U.S. Air Force. Sergeant Chagan was born in Canton near the end of the First World War on October 28, 1918. He was one of 6 children. The others were sisters. When he was 5, his family moved to Simsbury, where he later graduated from Simsbury High School. Post-graduation, he worked for the Anchor Fence Company in Hartford. Sergeant Merwin was inducted into the Army on January 7, 1942, and was immediately assigned to the Air Corps, where he achieved the rank of corporal, then staff sergeant for only 4 months. In January 1943, he was promoted to technical sergeant and served as a personal clerk for his commanding officer. He was known for his cheery disposition, willingness, and determination, which allowed him a speedy achievement through the ranks. In his final letter to his parents, Merwin emphasized how the Army gave him great opportunity to meet people and go places. Unfortunately, he was one of the 6-man crew that died when their B-26 bomber crashed during a cross-country flight on February 28, 1943. He's buried right here in town at Center Cemetery. Technical Sergeant Chagan was 24 and was survived by his parents and his 5 sisters.
Leon Hoppe enlisted into the U.S. Army in Hartford, Connecticut, September 5th, 1942.
He joined the 142nd Infantry E Company on March 4th, 1944. Prior to enlisting, Sergeant Hoppy worked for the Plainville Casting Company, and as a youngster, grew up on Meadow Plain Road along with his good pal from the age of 2, Arthur Scanocchio. Sergeant Hoppy participated in the North African Campaign in Sicily, where he earned the Purple Heart in February of 1944. He later died on June 13, 1944, at the age of 22, due to combat wounds he received in Magliano, Italy. Sergeant Hoppy was survived by his mother, father, sister, and 4 brothers. He is buried at the St. Bernard Cemetery in Terriffill, Connecticut.
It's 3 o'clock. There's a nationwide moment of remembrance. I'd like to stop and just for a couple seconds be silent as we join with the rest of our country in remembering the men and women that have died in its service. Thank you.
Clifton Irving Brno, born November 15, 1917, married Dorothy Saunders on November 5, 1942, in the First Church of Christ and resided on Seminary Hill Road. Mr. Brno had been working at Pratt & Whitney Aircraft Company, and his wife had been working at Ensign Bigford. Mr. Brno enlisted into the Navy and was a second-class seaman. He was stationed in the South Pacific, where he was killed in action on October 12, 1943, at the age of 25. Seaman Second Class Brno is buried in Honolulu, Hawaii, in the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific.
Private First Class Isidore W. Zarnowski was born June 20th, 1924, to Isidore and Emma Zarnowski. He had 3 sisters, Florence, Emma, and Edna, and his family lived in Terriffill, Connecticut. He attended Simsbury High School for 2 years and was then employed at Colt's Manufacturing Company, which produced firearms. He was enlisted May 13, 1944, when he was 19 years old. He was a private first class in the 16th Infantry Regiment in the U.S. Army's 1st Infantry Division, known as the Big Red One, the most recognized U.S. Army formation of World War II. He was killed in action shortly after his division crossed the Ludendorff Bridge on March 25, 1945, when he was 20 years old. The bridge served as one of the few remaining bridges across the River Rhine before it was destroyed. The Rhine served as Germany's last major line of defense, and crossing it allowed the Allied forces to capture the German industrial area of Ruhr. The war ended approximately 5 months later. Private First Class Isidore W. Zarnowski was laid to rest at St. Bernard Cemetery in Terriffill, Connecticut.
On August 3, 1943, at the age of 21, future Private First Class Arthur L. Scanocchia enlisted in the U.S. Army in Hartford, Connecticut. During World War II, Scanocchia served in the 119th Infantry Regiment and 30th Infantry Division. After enlistment, Private Scanocchia trained at Camp Gruber in Oklahoma before being sent to England in May 1944. Growing up in Simsbury, Connecticut, Scanocchia went through 4 years of high school. He was skilled in machine shop as well as other similar trades, and at the time of his enlistment in 1943, Scanocchia was working in the Hartford Machine and Screw Company. Private Scanocchia was also remembered as a good friend. He and his best friend, Private Leon J. Hoppy, had grown up as pals in Meadow Plain since they were the age of 2. Their friendship continued until both enlisted into the U.S. Army, though they are still remembered by many as best friends. The 2 men passed away within a month of each other. Private Skinocha passed away on July 12, 1944, in battle, and was buried at the Normandy American Cemetery in Colleville-sur-Mer, France. He was awarded the Purple Heart for his service. When he passed, he left behind his father and mother, as well as 2 sisters, though he will be remembered by many more.
Thank you, Scouts. Next part of the ceremony, we're going to lay a wreath. The wreath is going to be laid by our World War II veteran and Grand Marshal Dan Crowley, assisted ably by his wife Kelly. And as they're doing that, we're going to be serenaded by the Talcott Mountain Highlanders under the direction of Emily Feeney. Mr. Crowley? Thank you. We're coming to the end. In the next couple minutes, we're going to have taps played by Cole Bursell and Andrew Brewster from Simsbury High School. But before that, we're going to have a rifle squad salute. Commander of the Rifle Squad, salute the dead. Veterans, attention, hand salute. Two. Color guard, retire the colors. Hey, John.
Hi, I'm Nick Sinacori from SCTV, and I'm here at the 2019 Simsbury Memorial Day Parade. Please welcome Dan. Dan, what was the occasion you marched for in the Memorial Day Parade?
I'm here to march with the Freemasons.
How many Memorial Day parades have you marched in?
2.
What is your favorite part about marching in the Memorial Day Parade?
Seeing people who I know, and as well as honoring fallen heroes of the country.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Debbie Payne of the Abigail Phelps chapter, Daughters of the American Revolution of Simsbury. And we're very proud to be able to sponsor a trolley float this year. And our theme is World War II. It's the 75th anniversary of D-Day, and so our theme is honoring our veterans, all of our veterans, but with a particular emphasis on World War II. And we'd like to bring out the important role of women in the war, serving in the military and many other ways. Factory workers, Red Cross, nurses, on the home front with conservation and farming. So I'm Rosie the Riveter today, and we're very proud to be here. Thank you.
How many years have you been in the Memorial Day Parade?
We've been in the parade since 2001. We actually do the morning parade in Terriffill and the Simsbury parade every year, rain or shine.
What has been your favorite part about doing the Memorial Day Parade?
I think it's a good way to remember, and for twirlers, it's a great performance opportunity and to show our do our gift, which is twirling, for our veterans and for people that have served. You know, we think it's a great day.
And what does Memorial Day mean to you?
It means honoring the people that are serving and the people we've lost.
Thank you very much. And I'm pleased to welcome a vet from Simsbury. What year did you fight in the war?
1948, 1946 to 48.
What does Memorial Day mean to you?
What it means to me is I was privileged to serve in one of the most active divisions in World War II. It was all solicitations. It wasn't regular army. It was all draftees. And they did a tremendous job in Italy. So much so that Axel Selle reported one day that those blue soldiers, because she didn't know which one it was, and found that we had a blue patch on our arm, those blue soldiers fought like devils. And our management, our commanders, thought Blue Devils was a good name for it, so they got the name Blue Devil Division. And they got permission from the military to wear the blue scarves instead of neckties. So I was, for a little while, I was on the Morgan line trying to keep people apart. And then I got transferred to the division at Trieste, which was another hotly contested area. And our job was trying to keep people from killing one another and stealing territory. So I spent the rest of my active time there in Trieste, Italy, doing this job.
I'm pleased to welcome First Selectman of Simsbury, Eric Wellman. Eric, how many Memorial Day Parade have you marched in since you've been selected Simsbury's First Selectman?
Nick, thanks for having me. This is
You're welcome.
This is my privilege to march in my second Memorial Day Parade. Last year was my first.
What is your favorite part of marching in the Memorial Day parades here in this awesome town of Simsbury?
So I know the parade is the funnest part, but for me, taking part in the ceremony at the end, it's a reminder of what Memorial Day is all about, which is that we're paying tribute to and remembering the men and women who've lost their lives in conflicts throughout our nation's history, and standing there at the Veterans Memorial with the names of Simsbury residents inscribed forever. It's just a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Can you describe a moment what it was like to march in the Memorial Day parade?
Sure. So I remember walking past the cemetery in the center of town, looking up the hill at the flags that Boy Scout Troop 76 put on the graves of veterans, and just thinking how fortunate we are to live in a town like Simsbury where people give back and where we have so many veterans to thank for the freedoms that we enjoy today.
What do you like about watching the Memorial Day parade?
Well, personally, we've been watching it for over 30 years, but
yes,
I love to see all the different groups and listen to the music and everything. But actually, it's the remembrance that we get for all those veterans that served in our armed forces, and many who have made this sacrifice. Gave their lives so that we could have a day such as this.
Right. We honored them all. And many memories we have of all our children that used to march in this parade. Now they're older, and they're here watching it with us.
What does Memorial Day mean to you guys?
Well, as I said earlier, Nick, it's really an honor of those who made the supreme sacrifice for our country, and to share in their memories. My dad survived World War II. He served in the Navy and the South Pacific. He saw some action down there. He was away for probably 4 of the early years of my life. So, but they all did a great job.
They sure did.
And we honor that.
And we're not going to forget what it all means. Why this is so significant. This is a wonderful day to remember. Not that we want to remember that people died for us, but they died for our freedom. And that's what we appreciate, our freedom.
I'm pleased to welcome Anton. Anton, what does Memorial Day mean to you?
It means opportunity to take a day to absolutely thank the troops that have served, those that are still serving, and I have a father that was a veteran, so it's a special day for me.
I'm pleased to welcome the Dufords. What does Memorial Day mean to you guys?
Well, Memorial Day means honoring our servicemen, both current servicemen and those who have served, our veterans. And it's all about also community spirit, everyone coming out for the parade today and being together as a community.
I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Hampton. Mr. Hampton, what does Memorial Day mean to you?
Well, great to see you, Nick.
Nice to see you too.
On this beautiful Memorial Day. It's always a great day in Simsbury and Terrafil. We had 2 beautiful parades today, and we remember all our beloved dead who fought, paid the ultimate price for our freedoms that we hold dear. I stopped at my grandfather's grave today in Terrafil, fought in World War I. He was a pilot, and thought of so many men and women who've lost their lives so that we can be free and live in this beautiful country and this beautiful town, this beautiful state. So I'm extremely grateful, and we're blessed to be citizens of the greatest democracy in the world.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sinagori.
You're welcome.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.